Hello, and thank you for joining us for Pact. P is for Peter, that is me. This is ACD, Miss Astronaut Cowboy Doctor is what that stands for. If you're interested in supporting us, subscribe and follow on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends about our little politics show as well. If you really want to help us out, become a patron at patreon.com/PeterCoffin. Or click the join button below. Joining gets you into the Discord server, gets you exclusive content, and you see some content before everybody else. We stream 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in. So AOC.
We actually had trouble reading this because it was, we were thinking about initially reading line by line, but it was so abhorrent to interface with for a long period of time that we just could not do it. And also a lot of it is cyclical and redundant.
Article is called Talking Socialism, Catching Up with AOC. It is an article that was published by Democratic Left, which is a publication of the Democratic Socialists of America. The interview was a complete about-face for everything she claimed to stand for.
Everything that she claimed to stand for when she was running in whatever the fuck year it was. I mean, now she's pretty much already just shown that she doesn't really care about anything. But this was significantly less subtle than I had even anticipated.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Frankly, I would love to not be talking about AOC, but somehow she manages to be at the very center of recuperating any form of class politics and sheepdogging people who are in the Bernie movement into the DNC. And if she wasn't at the center of that on a constant basis, we wouldn't talk about her. And that'd be great.
Let's get into it.
So this was an interview that was conducted on January 26th, and it was just published yesterday as part of the Spring 2021 Democratic Left edition. Right here with the old article, there's a lovely photo of our woman right there. I almost feel like they chose photos that they were in the middle of something specifically so that people might make fun of them.
Fabricated outrage.
Yeah. Because there's that photo and there's another photo later, which is people called a chipmunk online and other people got angry about it being called a chipmunk. I don't know. I feel kind of like maybe there was some bait there. All right. So let's start the article. Bronx Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, best known as AOC, is DSA's foremost socialist superstar. I think we just instantaneously get to the annoyance.
This is the DSA, right?
The DSA, this is a Democratic Socialists of America publication called Democratic Left. This is the DSA being hey, you know what? This is the most socialist person that you could go to right now. And goddamn, if this person isn't famous as shit, holy hell.
Oh, so the CIA wrote it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the thing that Movie Bob got mad at me about yesterday.
What?
For quote tweeting him and the guy wearing the FBI.
Oh, right.
Computer.
Let's get beyond that first very annoying line.
I'm sorry. I can't.
No, I am also sorry. That is.
I'm hot. I'm too hot.
We're coming in hot.
Gun fever, too hot.
The Netflix documentary, Knock Down the House, details her life story up to that victory. Jesus Christ, they really want you to consider her amazing.
They're framing her specifically as a celebrity.
Yes. You need to learn about the entire life of this person. Since then, her influence has only grown. Earnest, fun, relatable, and fierce. She became... Oh, and also, let me just go ahead and say this. Why are those words describing a politician?
I was just thinking that. Also, how do they know that?
This is brand shit right here. This is marketing copy.
They're branding her.
She became one of Congress's best-known members overnight and used all the attention to pull the national conversation leftward. In October 2019, her endorsement revivified Bernie Sanders' campaign following his heart attack. Yeah, it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It wasn't like, the entire movement of people behind Bernie Sanders or anything. The people who believed in a platform where they would have like some degree of social safety net beyond like the meager bullshit promised to them that's been chipped away at for 60, 70 years. No, it was her. Today, with over 12 million Twitter followers, which is, the most important thing for
which
a
is,
politician.
of course, relevant to this.
This is marketing copy. This is the DSA hyping her up to be their representation in the media sphere. And her picture on the December cover of Vanity Fair, mass cultural appeal to teens and the not yet political, which, no, that's not true.
Regardless of socioeconomic standing, can you just think to, I don't know, your seniors in high school who think they're hot shit and they know everything, and they hear about AOC and there's some centrist who says I don't care about politics. They're really going to be turned on by this socialist identifying TikTok influencer. Get the hell out of here.
To start off the interview, the DSA asked AOC what was her path to joining the DSA, which again is very obvious marketing copy setup. I, the DSA, would really like to know why exactly it is you joined our organization, which is going to print this interview, explain why everyone should do exactly what you're doing. I love this question because I think that my path in the DSA very much shaped my organizing strategy. I didn't grow up in an incredibly ideological household. I have friends that grew up with the children of unionists, professors, individuals, 2 or 3 generations deep into working class movements. That was not my family. I grew up very working class. My mother cleaned houses. My father had a small business. Both my parents grew up in extreme poverty, which, sympathy. My parents did not have money either.
Neither did mine.
I want to add that having a small business makes you not working class.
Yeah, you are literally in the capitalist class if you are owning the means of production for your business.
You're the petite bourge, but you're the bourge. That is not to say that the petite bourge in a modern context don't have interests that are a lot closer to the working class than they are to Jeff Bezos. But it is expository of the fact that this socialist is not operating on a materialist framework.
Yes.
I mainly pointed that out not because I think the petite bourge are evil and we need to shun them, because I actually don't think that. I think the opposite. But I think that it just betrays the understanding of A, what the DSA wants to promote, and B, what the most popular socialist superstar in the country is using as a theoretical underpinning, which is not using a theoretical underpinning.
And having a theoretical underpinning is bad.
It's very bad. To use theory is bad. To, learn things and know things.
To have the only viable underpinning of a working class movement is bad. You're only allowed to vote and pretend that you're doing something worth organization for it to be pro-working class. As long as it doesn't actually work, it's pro-working class.
Yes, when it doesn't change anything, fundamentally speaking, then it's pro-working class. What initially drew me to the DSA was the fact that they showed up everywhere that I showed up. I started my work as a community organizer before I even knew about the existence of the DSA. And I was busy doing work for my community, working with children, working with families, advocating for educational equity. A friend of mine invited me to a DSA meeting in the Bronx Upper Manhattan branch. We were in the basement of a church uptown in Washington Heights, I believe. It was my first time being exposed to DSA, and to me it was like, okay, we're hearing all this rhetoric and having discussions. And I'm like, okay, another group of folks talking. This is great. This is encouraging.
She is terrible at talking.
Yeah. The apolitical folks, when they read that stuff, though, they're just like, oh my God, I'm a socialist now.
The thing is, when she's saying okay, people are talking, but I want to do something, what she is doing is she's reflecting all of the things that we say we're feeling all the time as communists in these neoliberal spaces and saying, okay, people are talking, nothing's getting done. And she's using this sort of leftist revolutionary aesthetic of like wanting to do something without actually doing anything under the guise of political pragmatism. And that is abhorrent to me. Like it really makes this, and I am doing this for y'all because there are other things that I could be working on. It makes me feel sick. My stomach hurts reading this and I hate it.
I also want to add that this establishes like her kind of skepticism of talk. The reason I think that ACD's characterization here is important is that like when you go in somewhere and you think that technically like you don't disagree with things, but you feel like it's not enough and you're just kind of like, great, that's good. That's encouraging, I guess. You know, it's kind of that statement that we're getting here. You know, there's a lot of people who talk about class issues. There's a lot of people who are deep in the discourse of struggle. But me, as someone who grew up in these environments, it was the translation to action that was distinctive to me. This is, for me, like probably the real craw magic of this article. Yeah, all that theoretical shit, all that, you know, talk, it doesn't lead to action. The translation to action that the DSA takes, that's what's distinctive to me, DSA interviewer.
Yeah.
What's happening here is basically her saying like, hey, you know that other org you're aware of, or just like that group of communists that's talking about class shit? Well, that's all talk. The DSA, those guys are about action.
Yeah.
You want to see somebody actually pulling some shit off, you head down to a DSA meeting.
And that's the thing too. So it was really instructive for me, and I saw people really doing things, and that's what has affected me in my organizational strategy. What has she fucking done using her organizational strategy in Congress? She couldn't even do the symbolic victory of like withholding the vote for Medicare for all. And that's something that like wouldn't have even had a material impact. And they use that. Libs love that fucking shit when it's advantageous to them or it supports what they're doing. And she could not even do the symbolic victory.
Anyways, that was what made the DSA initially distinctive to me. Distinctive from what? The implication being versus other leftist organizations. It felt like something fundamentally different to me, even in the context of electoralism, which, by the way, we're being sold electoralism at this point. We're in the first question. We're being sold electoralism.
Yeah. The fact that she is indicating that in her response is what that says.
Ironically enough, before I ran for Congress, I myself had huge doubts around electoralism. That's why I dove into community organizing, because I was one of those folks that felt we're not going to get any substantive change through electoral politics. It's not going to happen, man. Biden wasn't my first choice, but he's sure as hell better than that big old fascist orange man who is bad. I'm going to eat kitchen tiles if you don't vote for Biden.
That's a really good reflection of how fucking circular everything that she says is without answering a goddamn thing.
I felt that way because I grew up around Bronx machine politics, where there's a lot of cynical use and weaponization of identity under the guise of lobbyist-driven policies and corporate policy. I had essentially given up on it, and I felt the only way we're going to do this is by committing ourselves to our communities, which is like, she's literally like, I was just like you guys. I was like, electoralism is bullshit.
There it is again. It's the weaponizing of these progressive optics that she knows are going to land that way while doing the exact opposite. And while always doing the exact opposite. Even the things that, like, she has appeared in like activist circles and community organizing situations. And all of those appearances were made after all of the labor had been done for those things, and after she is criticized in the media for being adherent and supportive of the democratic status quo. It's all bullshit.
And so it was that first meeting that I felt, okay, this is something that's real. Also, the history of New York City and in communities of color, when you have the young lords, you have this organizing heritage. There's historically tension between the DSA and these organizing collectives of color, whether it was Latino or Puerto Rican collectives, Chicano collectives, black collectives. It was like, oh, it's these white folks, laughs. There was this historical fissure, but it really felt like a moment where we were coming together. And so when I would see DSA showing up providing real structural support at BLM rallies, by the way, rallies which were eventually co-opted by BLM, the NGO, as opposed to a bunch of angry people about police brutality, just putting that out there.
People who are justifiably angry and that we are absolutely part of.
When I say angry people, like that is the good thing, as opposed to the bad thing, which is the NGO subsuming them. Or support for abolishing ICE, where we felt like it wasn't this class essentialism, which, by the way, that's characterizing like small-time communist parties, groups of communists, etc., as class essentialists, which is, I'm really excited to see a new version of class reductionism. I'm really excited to see a different word being used so that now that a bunch of people have heard it from AOC, they'll repeat it over and over on fucking social media like they know something, which they
Have you guys ever seen a communist organization that says, yeah, ICE should exist, and I think that we should exploit undocumented people? Insane.
100%.
Class reductionism, class essentialism. I don't really see the difference between those two things. I mean, definitionally, they're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I think both of those are things that are not like institutionalized ideologies that people
absolutely 100%. Class reductionism is not a real problem in terms of like having reach to impact a leftist movement. Are there people out there somewhere? Sure, whatever. I don't really give a shit. Like, there's not enough of them for it to be a significant issue in terms of advancing a class-conscious movement. Again, in order to be class-conscious, you need to have a critique of ideology. That includes critiques of bigotry, includes liberation politics, et cetera, et cetera. That stuff is not outside the purview of class analysis.
The thing is you don't have a class analysis if those things aren't incorporated into it. Is divided on those socio-demographic lines.
It's literally the thing that is used to maintain class. Like, to have a class analysis without that stuff, it's useless. Are there a lot of people that are like that, though? No. Not even in fucking fetish ass fucking bread tube shit. Like, you start talking about class and they shit the fuck on you. They want you to go the fuck away. They don't want to talk about class, even a fetishy version of class. They don't want to talk about it. They want it gone. They say class reductionism, not because people are reducing things to class. They say class essentialism, not because they're essentializing things along class lines. They say it because they don't want you talking about class. Period.
People don't sit around talking about the Nazgul vortex or the dangers of class reductionism in real life. That is so fucking funny to me when I get accused of that shit.
The National Bolsheviks were a small political party in Russia like a decade ago. There is no meaningful institution of quote-unquote Nazguls. There's no institutional spreading of that ideology. I would say you would be very hard-pressed to find somebody who actually adheres to an actual official Nazgul platform out there. And I don't give a shit. Class, again, requires you to have a critique of ideology. If you don't, you are not going to overcome false consciousness. You are not going to overcome ideology. You're going to end up spinning your fucking wheels around with some fetishized version of class that's actually an identity, which is what the liberals fucking want. And it doesn't exist. People aren't like that. Anyway, but that this really was a multiracial class struggle that didn't deprioritize human rights, which, again, which communist party are you fucking talking about? Which group locally are you fucking talking? Like, this kind of language is used to make the DSA, this totally ineffective DNC sheepdog fucking organization, look good compared to all these other quote unquote class essentialist fucking like groups, orgs, and parties. Anyways, she was really impressed and felt like it was something worth being a part of. And for me, that's the real distinction between us saying we're about something And it's really about our actions. Like the Pope says, so...
I was thinking the same fucking thing. And what has she done? When Peter and I were talking about this earlier, we were talking about how it's very reminiscent of the way that when Barack Obama was pushing a lot more progressive initiatives in his earlier political career, and then
particularly during the campaign.
Yeah. And then sort of not died out or like even changed, but just like it adapted to the climate of what was acceptable to say, and then he became like quintessential neoliberal do-nothing.
Yeah.
She is using language that a like typical run-of-the-mill like central liberal person would read this and would be like, yeah, like that seems right. Like, yeah, it does seem kind of like a big ask to like, you know, say she hasn't done anything. I mean, look at all the stuff that she's done because of the way that she's communicating it. And it's all just aesthetics.
It is. Absolutely. What has she done? Like, legislatively speaking, keeping that in mind, we're not going to read this question entirely because it's looping around saying the Green New Deal and Medicare for All are great, while being a politician that had an opportunity to at least force an aesthetic advance on Medicare for All, and wouldn't even do that. DSI's priorities really are your priorities as well, Green New Deal and Medicare for All in particular. There's no getting around the fact that each of those are going to require an act of Congress, which is, by the way, framing this question as you need to tell people to vote, because that's what this fucking org is for. This org is about telling people to participate in electoral politics and not do anything radical. It is setting up the limits of what is acceptable to do. If indeed you are sick and tired of electoralism and sick and tired of the Democratic Party stopping us from doing any real stuff, man, I'm going to go into the DSA because they're socialists, right? That's further to the left, right, man? That's what it's for. It's for sucking that person up and making them do stuff that benefits the DNC. And it's evidenced right here. There's no getting around the fact that each of those are going to require an act of Congress. So anyways, she acknowledges that, and then she goes around in circles talking about how Medicare for All is great. She takes a dump on Pete Buttigieg because she knows that the set that's paying attention to her right now hates Buttigieg. That kind of stuff doesn't matter. When somebody says Medicare for All is important and we need to have Medicare for All, it doesn't fucking matter because a lot of people can say that. What are they doing?
It's her actions.
It's her actions. To quote the fucking Pope, who is at it again. This is where this question lands. This is where she ultimately had to go. Because keep in mind, this was an interview by the DSA about her involvement in the DSA. This is something that was discussed ahead of time. This is something that was approved. They knew it was going to be good for them. And ultimately, this kind of thing is contemplated ahead of time. What they landed on is, in the best case scenario, we get incredible new members of Congress, or we win those open seats. You know, Rashida Tlaib was an open seat. And at worst, we get almost a radical change in the agenda of the incumbent that is presently there. And in so many ways, it's a win-win in getting that internal traction, which is necessary. Like, look at what was just said. This is, without saying the words vote or participate in elections, saying you can only participate in electoral politics. Best case scenario, you get more people into Congress that support Medicare for All. Best case scenario. Here's where I really want to bring up the force the vote thing. Like, in terms of communism or socialism, Medicare for All is neither of those things. It is simply a reform which would make people's lives a little bit easier in today's fucking hell-ass society. And I support Medicare for All. I think it's a necessity. I think it is a bare minimum and a basic. Now, if you were action-oriented, you would take whatever power you have and leverage it. If the squad really supported Medicare for All, they would not have voted for Nancy Pelosi. They would have withheld that in order to get a floor vote on Medicare for All. And that floor vote could have been used to demonstrate all of the people who voted no on it. And if you had that kind of list on hand, you could probably a little more easily actually accomplish this paragraph. But that's not what's going on here, because they won't bother with that kind of thing. Even a slightly more effective electoralism is something they're not willing to pursue. Some on the left have looked at Biden's record and his differences with the Bernie wing of the party, and they conclude that no progress is going to come out of the Biden administration. What's your view? Well, I think it's a really privileged critique. We're going to have to focus on solidarity with one another, developing our senses for good faith critique and bad faith critique, because bad faith critique can destroy everything that we have built so swiftly. Which, by the way, what have we built so swiftly?
Yeah. Yeah, remember that whole thing in 2020 where there was like a public health care crisis, and like, despite it already existing, a very blatant view of the racialized dynamics in our country through the lens of police brutality. And then despite all the effort that was put into that from an organizational grassroots perspective, it just fucking stopped.
Yeah. I mean, you had all those things going on, and then the NGOs subsumed it. And then as soon as it got Biden elected, all that shit stopped. They shut the protests off. And yeah, I mean, there's still people angry and people out in the streets. There's even Black Lives Matter chapters that are angry about the fucking NGOs that took over Black Lives Matter and are still out doing that shit. But is that shit getting covered to the American public? No.
Well, no, because I didn't even know that.
It's true. There's Black Lives Matter chapters that have been explicitly critical of the NGO Black Lives Matter for coming in and basically subsuming the operation that they were attempting to put forward, which is an anti-police brutality, citizen-driven protest movement. We do not have the time or luxury to entertain bad faith actors in our movement, which, just to be clear, being critical of the Biden administration, saying that they're not getting anything done or that their platform is not one of progress, that makes you a bad faith actor. Again, keep in mind that this question was about Biden criticism. If you are criticizing and putting forward the idea that the neoliberals are not getting anything done, especially things that were promised at some point, for instance, I don't know, maybe like $2,000 checks to the people of Georgia, who that got thrown out and it's $1,400 checks, so on and so forth. That's the easiest example. There's tons of other examples. You are a bad faith actor if you talk about any of that shit. You are not allowed to talk about any of that shit. Don't talk about it. Like, that's bad faith. It's bad faith critique. People need to understand that they need to recognize the bad faith critique, guys. Good faith is when it supports the DNC, and bad faith is when it criticizes the DNC.
It really chaps my asshole when people say that I don't care about ideological bias, because I've constructed, as Peter knows, an entire model incorporating that as a critical contributor to health inequities, particularly also in chronic illness. Like I do try to underpin it with a materialist analysis, but like I focus specifically on racial and ethnic minorities and older adults. It's so unfortunate because I feel like I use this so much. I'm very frequently stating what I do and what my credentials are. But the reason that I do that is because when you juxtapose what those things are and what I've dedicated my life to what this abhorrent career politician is saying I'm a bad faith actor for criticizing the DNC, it looks fucking ridiculous. And so I can't prevent myself from saying that, because how could you say that somebody who is like doing material efforts and is critical of the system are the people that we need to be afraid of and exclude from a working class movement? That sounds like it's intentional to make things not work. It's saboteur.
Very intentionally setting the borders of what's acceptable as quote unquote leftism. If you're one of those commies who's saying that the DNC is the problem, if you're saying that neoliberalism is the problem, if you're looking at this administration and you're saying they don't do anything, well, that's bad faith, man. You're just full of shit, man. You're just one of those outsiders. You're just fucking around. You're just expecting too much, or you don't care at all. You're just talking. You're not doing anything. You're just so on and so forth. Like, by the time we've gotten to this point in the article, there's like a number of things that you could easily be like, oh yeah, those people who act like that, they don't do anything. They're just all talk. They're not like organizing. For anyone who brings that up, we have to ask ourselves, what's the message that we're sending to our black and brown and undocumented members of our community, to our friends, when we say nothing has changed? Perhaps not enough has changed, and this is not a semantic argument. Just the other night, we in Collective Struggle were able to stop the deportations of critical members of our community, and that would not have happened in a Trump administration. So this interview was recorded in late January. Since late January, Biden has suspended right to asylum. He's deported tens of thousands of refugees without court hearings. There's 15,000 children presently detained in immigration jails. So things are great for undocumented immigrants in the Biden administration. Things are super duper.
She hasn't spoken to anything about how undocumented folks are being treated in the Biden administration. And she's just using that as lip service to the Democrats, or the people that care about people of color and people who are not citizens, without like any material change in what's happened, save 9 families. By saying that, she is saying that the only people who are critical and focused on class analysis are white people, and that black and brown people are not attending to this. The class struggle is not important to them. They are not some of the primary instigators of revolutionary change, which they have been almost all of it.
Near exclusively outside of the really like the USSR and Paris Commune.
That is what is so distasteful to me. She's changing this into an identitarian lecture towards white people, and operating under the assumption that those are the people who care about class. Those are the people who are critical of the Biden administration. And then also for people who aren't as immersed in the politics, they say, oh, well, like if this is something that just white people are talking about, and like only white people are critical of the Biden administration, but like there are these racialized disparities in the country. I mean, maybe it's not really important if this isn't something that like marginalized groups ideologically don't care about, which of course that's not the case. And this is a very diverse, international, multicultural, multiracial movement in the United States. And she is scapegoating this as a white person's problem. That is fake and uncritical of issues that are actually affecting the diverse working class. We're actually obviating what her role is and perpetuating the structures that sustain those inequities.
Anyways, and these are really not nitpicking questions of semantics, which, by the way, she does not know how to stop saying this is not nitpicking, this is not semantics. And
the only reason she's saying that is because she knows the audience that's paying attention to her who is going to criticize it that way. And so she's jumping the gun by addressing it before you can say it.
Yeah.
Well, this argument that is completely semantics and not rooted in reality is not an argument that is completely semantic and not rooted in reality. Just so you know, that's not what this is, even though that's exactly what the content of what I just said reflects.
And she goes on to say, because this is how the language that we use communicates to individuals who is included and who you consider as a person. I'll just say right now, this is great. This is encouraging, AOC. It's nice that you care.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, when you say nothing has changed, you are calling the people who are now protected from deportation no one, which you would be right if you're saying no one is protected from deportation. That would be 100% correct. Just to be clear, what I mean by that is, yes, there are people who have been given permission to stay in this country. Does that mean they are safe? No. The state can revoke that at any minute. And also, again, they deported 15,000 people since this interview was conducted.
There are still concentration camps full of Latin Americans.
Anyway, we cannot allow for that in our movement. That's not a movement I want to be a part of. Which we're branding again, if you're not noticing.
What is her movement? Is the question that I have.
Her movement is her 12 million Twitter followers. That's the movement.
Yeah, she's an influencer and nothing else.
And I know that's not the movement that we are a part of. We're so susceptible to cynicism. And that cynicism, that weaponization of cynicism, is what has and what continues to threaten to tear down everything we have spent so much time building up. We're allowed to win too, by the way. Laughs. She's laughing because they haven't won anything. And they can't. They won't. They're not going to try. At this point, the DSA interviewer said, "I prefer winning, actually. Millions of people are excited about you being in Congress and rooting for your success. But at the same time, no other figure has been targeted by the Fox News crowd quite like you have. Why do you think that they worked to make you such a boogeyman for the right wing? And what's it like to be on the receiving end of that?" And let's round out with this. I think they've done it because they know that we are a threat.
To what?
She's certainly not a threat to Nancy Pelosi's votes. She's certainly not willing to threaten anyone to try to get something fucking done.
Right. Then what is this fucking for?
So basically, the overarching point here is that the DSA is actively working to make you not care about class analysis. They don't want you to talk about class. Why is that? It's because that is the relationship of having and not having. That's class. Haves, have nots. That's class. If you care about that as a base for your understanding of the systemic injustices that are incorporated into this country and basically any capitalist country, or if we take a hard veering into neo-feudalism, that won't change. It's class. AOC and the DSA and the DNC and all this stuff, it's there to make that seem less appealing, and that the only real leftists are the ones that they engage with. The good faith leftists, the ones that won't criticize Democrats. So yeah, beware of non-materialist organizations. Attempt to suss out their ideology, their underpinning theory. If they have none, that should be a red flag for you. Thanks for joining us. Click like, click subscribe, become a patron/member. We really appreciate it. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.